Spotify. Phil, stop touching your mic.
Okay.
Isaac's yawning.
This is mind games. This is mind games.
Isaac's not bringing the energy to this podcast. Okay, Phoebe, your ratings are becoming meaningless.
Phil, I can hear you typing.
Just like
You read the wrong book.
The old read the wrong book.
we're literally
Like
we're
there's
gaslighting ourselves. That's how much this Goodreads didn't.
Let's go beyond the first page. Let's go beyond the first page.
Hello, second pagers, and welcome back to Beyond the First Page with siblings Phebe, Phil, and Isaac. I'm Phoebe.
I'm Phil.
I'm Isaac.
And this is Club Meeting 21, and we will be discussing Mind Games by Nora Roberts. As always, before we get started, this is a reminder to follow us on Spotify, follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and you can find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also, we will be talking about major plot points and spoilers from throughout this book. So if you don't want to get Mind Games by Nora Roberts ruined for you, really recommend that you read the book and then come on and listen to the podcast. And if you're new here, we always start off with a fun little thought from the siblings.
Or for this one, also don't read the Goodreads summary because nothing else happens in this book. So if you don't want this book ruined, just don't read anything about this book.
Which is what we did when we picked it. And had I read about it, maybe I wouldn't have picked it. But that's neither here nor there. We will discuss away as always, regardless of our thoughts and feelings. And our fun thought for the day for the siblings is a this or that. And one of the reasons I picked it is this book in general is just a ball of cheese. And so I thought the cheesiest thing we could do was a this or that for a book edition for this or that. Okay, so for the this or that book edition, the first is, would you prefer to read a book hard copy or listen to it on Audible? Phil, I'll defer to you first.
Easily Audible.
Isaac?
I haven't read a book in hard copy for years.
Yeah.
Hard copy.
I would also say hard copy. I just think with the busy lives that we all lead, obviously we're listening a lot more than we're physically reading, but there's nothing more sweet than being able to have enough time to read a hard copy book. Would you rather a standalone book or a series? Phil?
Series, easy.
Yeah, series.
Series for
as
me.
well.
Series for me too. Do you prefer books that make you cry or make you laugh?
I think cry. I don't cry as much as I need to, and I don't know how to make myself cry. So anything that makes me cry is like really cherished. I know there's a well of emotion down there that needs to be let out, and I can't let it out. So if you can get me to cry, it's good.
The older sister
I
in
like
me is
the
like, I'll
laugh.
make you cry. I'll give you something to cry about. Sorry, Isaac, go ahead.
I like the laugh. I think it's kind of difficult to do as a like from a literary sense to like make someone cackle while they're reading. So if that does happen to me, I always like notice it. I'm like,
This is funny.
hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am with Phil. I like to cry. I agree with you, Isaac, but I think I want to feel something more powerful from a book. Do you enjoy a cast of characters or a plot that hooks you?
Oh, plot. I'm a big plot guy. The characters are cool, but I miss a lot with that. Whereas the plot I can follow every time.
Yeah, I think I've said it before. I think the cast of characters is always cool, but you need a good plot.
Yeah.
The plot obviously makes a book.
Yeah, I think I notice most when there's a bad plot, so I would say plot for me too. When you're hard copy reading, do you read every word or do you skim?
I read every word.
I read every word
You
unless I
skim?
don't know how to say that word, then I just go over it.
Oh, I skim a lot. Like I'll read, like if I'm looking at 2 pages, I'll read like 75%. And then the last like paragraph or two, I just go to the next page.
That is That's
wild.
maniacal.
Do you like to read multiple books at once or one at a time?
Multiple for me. I usually read one fiction and one nonfiction.
I like one at a time, but I actually right now am trying the multiple at a time, reading a hard copy and listening to one.
Okay.
And it's going pretty well, actually. So
Nice.
ask me again in a couple months.
I like to read one at a time. I think I need to focus the most on with that. Would you rather have dinner with your favorite author or your favorite book character?
Book character, because then I could meet a dragon. Yeah. Easy.
I guess book character as well.
Yeah, I would do book
'cause
character.
It's not possible, but
Yeah, I would do book character too. Would you rather read a fantasy or a sci-fi?
I actually sort of like when sci-fi meets fantasy. I think that's like the best high fantasy genre, but I think that's closer to fantasy. But I do think like the best fantasy worlds also make like there's a physics behind them that sort of the consistency makes it sci-fi almost. But I think technically it'd be fantasy.
Yeah,
fantasy.
for me too. Memoir or self-help?
I hate both of those books. I actually like my least favorite genre. I'll go self-help, but my least favorite genre is the self-help memoir.
Of course.
Where it's like, here's my life. Look at this decision I made. Like, you can learn from this.
Isaac?
I like the self-help book.
Yeah.
I like those.
I like a memoir, personally. And let the
There you go.
cheesiness continue, because Isaac will be able to give us Mind Games by Nora Roberts in 60 seconds now.
Okay.
Isaac's yawning.
This is Mind Games. This is Mind Games.
Isaac's not bringing the energy to this podcast.
Wait, Isaac, actually, before you do that, let's see a little shout out to Dr. Emily DeChico and the sign behind you. This has been a couple episodes
yes.
now with the first page page sign. And Emily, Isaac's wife, gave him this as a birthday present. And I think all the second pagers need to know about this. So shout out to Emily.
Yeah. It's very cool. I'm sorry, my head is so large. It really blocks most of the. I have to awkwardly sit like this to be able to see it.
Yeah,
though,
you're
so
like
I guess
off
we could try
screen.
that, but
Yeah. No, okay. So
the only
anyways.
place that fit.
Yeah, no, that's great.
All right, so
Nora Roberts. Mind Games, 60 seconds.
Mind Games in 60 seconds. This book follows Thea Fox and her family following the tragic murder of her parents at the hands of a psychopath, Ray Riggs. Thea witnesses this murder via a special power her family calls the Gift. As Thea gets older, she learns to deal with this horrible loss and becomes a successful video game creator working for her dream company, all while living next to her grandmother who raised her. She meets her childhood crush and they begin dating. All the time, though, Ray plagues her mind via the mental connection they both share. In the end, Thea is able to mentally beat Ray, and her family live happily ever after.
Yeah, that is Mind Games in 60 seconds. And I think if you didn't read this book, you would think that sounded kind of good and you might want to read it. And we can talk more about that because I don't want to give anything away. I have a lot of conflicting feelings as will come out about this book. But I think the first thing we wanted to do was not pull a doppelganger and just, rip this book apart for 30 minutes or whatever. So we started off by wanting to do alternate endings for this book because I think we all shared, at least I felt that this had a lot of potential and it just missed the mark for me. But all the elements were there to have a good book. And then it just wasn't a good book. So we decided the three of us were going to do each pitch an alternate ending. And we would love our listeners to let us know which alternate ending they think would be the best. And we say alternate ending, like pretty much changing the entire course of the book.
Yeah. So also you can just, if none of that these are good, or you just make your
Yeah.
own and comment that if you'd like to, for sure.
Yeah. So Phil, without further ado, would you give us the quote unquote alternate ending to Mind Games?
Sure. I'm glad you phrased it like that, Phoebe, because I was really having trouble keeping any of this book. And so I tried to keep all of the plot elements and family and romance that I knew that someone who would pick up a Nora Roberts book would want. So her parents are murdered, like what happens in the book. She finds the killer, like what happens in the book, but he's not charged because this is the real world, and a psychic vision of
Wait, damn, I
like
said
that
that
is the
too.
dumbest shit ever. So he's not charged because there's literally no evidence against him because she had a dream that he killed her. And also he's much older than she is. So he has this psychic ability and he's actually better than her at it because he's older. So he like then realizes that like this girl's gonna follow him around his entire life unless he blocks her or murders her. So he blocks her and goes on doing bad stuff. She then she grows up. She has this troubled past because her parents were murdered. So she becomes sort of a recluse. She makes video games, spends a lot of time online. She then moves back with her family in Appalachia. Her brother and her had a horrible relationship, so he's out of the picture. Don't have to worry about him. His character sucked. Then her like childhood love, this like sort of this guy that's a little bit older than her, like 10 years older than her, was in a music band, comes back and brings his son, like what happens. Unfortunately, this guy is the guy who killed her parents, sort of redid his entire life, like redid his look because he knew that, yeah, I mean, he was on court, like he knew everyone knew him as like the national serial killer. So he changed his whole look. Then she falls in love with him, but his son, and she doesn't try reading him because she like tries to respect his privacy. And then his son finally shows her that he's a really bad dude by just like she glimpses abuse of emotion through his son. And then she finally does mentally attack him. And they have this like mental war. And then I don't know. Maybe we have it. Maybe he kills her and then the book ends.
Ooh, a little double twist.
That may be a little too many twists.
Yeah.
But that I think would be more interesting than this book.
Yeah. When you wrote this down, we have like a little summary sheet we write things down on to talk about what we want to say. And I was like, whoa, I would read this book. That's actually a really good plot. And I kind of had a similar train of thought of like a twist. Because when you read reviews, first of all, Goodreads gave this, I think, like a 4.4 out of 5.
Someone is paying people on
to
Goodreads
say that this is a good book. But we'll get into that because I have a counterpoint to that. But let's stay at the task at hand, which is that I had a similar thought. And I think that the whole summary is very misleading because it says a lot of twists and turns, but there was really no twists and turns in my mind. So for me, yours is very fleshed out, Phil. I don't know if mine is quite so fleshed out. I think she does solve the murder. So she witnesses the murder via her mind skill with Ray. She does solve the murder. And because of that, she becomes this consultant for the cops. I think having this be a murder mystery-esque, like cop-esque, would make this much more interesting to me personally. But in the end, it's somehow that her grandmother the whole time was the bad person, and she kind of had ultimate control over Ray or was in it together with Ray, and the grandmother plotted the murder of her parents so that Thea and her brother would come and live with her because she was getting lonely and up there in years. Because in my mind, the story teed that up. Like it kept talking about how, we need to visit grandma more. And there was this like pseudo custody battle at the beginning with her versus the other grandparents of their dad's like parents. So I thought,
yeah, good point. Nothing ever happened with that, and they could have been super evil.
Yeah,
cool.
so
we got to gosh darn hate them.
That's my least favorite part of the book. I'll spoil it. Nora Roberts, just complete lack of knowledge about anything in Appalachia.
You honeypots, just shut up and let Phoebe finish her sweet little telling, and then we'll get some fried chicken.
Oh my God. Okay. So anyways, back to my story. Ray. So the grandma helps Ray escape, and then Ray is stalking her, and then it becomes a thriller-esque where there's this cat and mouse with him finding her. And then I would say that Ty was keeping with your thread of like keeping kind of the main characters relevant, Phil. Ty was a minor love interest that plays like a minor just role in her existence and is not the whole second half of the book, like centered around the whole second half of the book. So in the end, I would say she still kills him, still lives happily ever after, but we get there a very different way. But with the twist of the grandma.
Definitely better than the book.
Isaac, what about you?
So I feel like I maybe combined a little bit of your guys' elements, but so I had the same thing. She sees Ray do the murders, but then the detectives like believe her that they did it, but they can't like charge him because it's
not real.
That's not evidence. So he is going to be let out. They arrest him, but then obviously he is going to be let out of jail because there's nothing there to hold him on. And then Thea is still kind of young in her gift, and her anger and emotions overtake it, and she ends up killing him via their like psychic connection. But then no one really thinks of it because they're like, okay, maybe he just got killed in jail or something. And then these detectives are still coming back to her like they do in the book to use her skill because they can still find these people and then just find the evidence to hold up. But her connection, like once she finds these people, she ends up hurting them in some way. Not necessarily killing them every time, but they're always being, mangled, or they become paralyzed. They like become like a vegetable, or they just die from her like emotional lashing out at them. So then the detectives finally kind of like put this together, and they're like, holy crap, this girl as she's growing up is,
becoming a menace,
doing these things. And some of them, and they're like torn because like, well, they deserve it, but also this isn't kind of the law. And the grandmother then also catches on that this is happening because, they all are very loving family and share everything that they do. So she tells them, eventually comes forward, tells the grandma that this is happening to her. And then the grandma's like, okay, I need to like take you under my wing. Turns out the grandmother has pretty much like run this entire town from her mind.
Whoa.
And has had them all under like a
spell.
Not like a spell, I guess like a spell. So like people are like thinking, but she has maneuvered them. So it has become this like, and the generations of women in the family have been doing that with this gift. So that's why Thea has this such
Isaac,
a tie.
So somebody in this family is actually bad, and not everyone is just benevolent, and nothing bad ever happens after.
Yeah. So they turn out, then Thea at first is like cool with it, but then Ty moves into town to keep the love story going. She realizes she doesn't want him just to love her because she has this like control over the town. So then she has a conflict with her grandmother to like take back control and give free will.
Yeah. That's a good one.
So I guess I keep the love story in there, but everything else quickly.
Yeah, I mean the love story sucked, but they like I think that the point of someone like no one would buy this without the love. Well, maybe people would, but it would be a different demographic. Maybe the same demographic would buy this with our story.
Yeah, maybe. I think so. Yeah, I think like I'd be curious. I definitely think leave us a comment. Let us know which story you think as an alternate ending would be the most compelling as the reader. The other thing we wanted to do with this, we did, of course, want to still bash it because is this the first page podcast without bashing a book that everyone else likes?
I cannot be convinced that this book is 4.5 on Goodreads.
I know,
I just read the wrong book.
The old read the wrong book.
We're literally
Like
We're
there's another
gaslighting
one.
ourselves. That's how much this Goodreads didn't.
No, I
Like,
think
wow.
Nora Roberts?
I think my biggest thing though was that the tee ups, there was so many. She teed herself up for so many intriguing plot lines. The grandparents in the beginning, I was like, something's going to go
Oh,
on with that.
yeah.
The cops, there could have been a whole courtroom drama. That like even the love interest coming back, that could have been a whole interesting thing. I just felt like, and honestly, the gift I thought was so interesting. I thought that having some people having a very normal world and then having just a minor tweak that you're kind of like, oh, wait, is this fantasy? I don't really know. I was like, wait, this is going to be
Right.
so interesting. And then on top of it, it was just like so much depression around the parents. Like I felt myself getting depressed for this girl. I was like, why do we have to
Yeah.
feel so sad about this? This is not the point of this book.
I think it's fine for the characters to be sad about their parents dying.
It was just like the amount of time that was drug out. Like normally in a book, it's like, okay, this happened, and then we skip forward if we're going to do that, and then
Well-
it's like we'll talk about why this person is screwed up now because of that, but we're not going to like feel this deep sadness for this girl. And I feel like it kept going.
But also, it was weird because it was so small in the beginning of the book. And then, yes, we're just like, there was no, like, it was just immediately solve the murder, parents' death, move on 15 years.
Right.
But then, okay, actually not move on and be here. Also, just like, I'm sorry, the interaction between the guy in prison and her didn't make any sense. I did not understand the point of that at all.
Yeah.
It was the worst use of telepathy I've ever encountered in any book.
I know, it's so disappointing because that could have been really cool.
I didn't even see the promise of it being able to be cool. I disliked it so much.
Okay. Like from the start, you were like,
Like
this is
I would have
uncool.
rather of this. Yeah, I would have rather this just been a really depressing book about parents being murdered and a daughter and kid like trying to get over that than the telepathic thing.
Oh.
I also didn't get the designing the video game.
Yeah,
Like
I hated that too.
I know, but didn't you
Yeah.
guys think that it would have been so like that was one of the first games besides like Ready Player One or first books, but besides like Ready Player One, Ready Player Two that I've read that includes video games at all. And I thought that was also really cool. Like, had she somehow gotten this guy into, which she did get him into this like virtual reality, but then it was just one time. It wasn't this like build up to this big game. It was this one time. She's like, I can solve all my problems by this one game. I thought that could have been really cool too. And you don't usually read books about video games.
I think that what you're honing in on, Phoebe, is that what Nora Roberts did with this book is make the Goodreads summary sound really, really cool by including every single plot element.
Yeah,
like
every buzzword.
I think one of the things that I will say positive about this book, because I could go on, is that it was the definition of like Marin and I have been talking about the term cozy. I'm not sure if you guys have ever heard that term, but it's basically.
Well, I've heard like what I like cozy. Like I know what the word cozy.
It's a cozy.
Oh,
so it's a cozy.
Okay.
So a cozy book it's a term. It's like the winter version of a beach read is what I've determined. Where it's like the vibes of a coffee shop into a book, but like not really meant to be like amazing, like meant to be easy. And I think that one thing, this book was an extremely easy read.
Yeah.
There was no points where I was lost. There was no points where it was confusing or even, I mean, it wasn't uninteresting. Like it was, the writing was good. I don't know how to
wasn't
describe
bad
it, but
writing.
it was just like,
I don't know that I would say it was good.
Right.
It wasn't bad. I think it was a cozy.
Yeah.
From what you're describing.
It could have been a cozy. It was
I called it a guilty pleasure airport read.
Yes.
That was a great,
Yeah.
Very good description.
So, I mean, I think we've kind of said all we need to say. I think there's just really, this is not a deep book. And I'm curious to talk a little bit about our recommendations because this is going to be extremely polarizing, I think.
I will say I would like to, just so we aren't like constantly bashing it. While the whole like Southern dialogue thing annoyed me a ton, I did like the kind of home, and this is what I thought you were going at with the cozy thing, Phil. But like the hominess of the descriptions of like the farm and the small town.
Yeah.
I mean,
Like
it was
Hallmark.
very unrealistic, but yeah. And that I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. And then I liked the description of like all the different houses. Now it's like threadbare, were taken care of, and like that it had, like her house was like that. Then they built the new houses, and it was like a, designed just for her, like fit right into this thing. Like,
Yeah.
that was to pick something good.
I think that also fits into a cozy, that description.
Yeah.
All of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to our ratings because I think we've gathered at least some specificity on exactly what we very much disliked about this. But I would like to say I would still give this book a 2 because I do think I would recommend this to a friend. I think we're very
That's how it's so high on Goodreads then.
Yes.
Yeah, wait,
You just
who the hell would
did
you
the
recommend
scale.
this
You
to?
messed the scale.
I know, and I'm sorry for doing this, but by our definition, I would not say so. The scale is 1 is it's a good book you wouldn't recommend to a friend. 2,
Okay, Phoebe, your ratings are becoming meaningless at this point.
just listen. I'll explain.
It really is.
Everyone's entitled to their rating.
Yes, I do think I would recommend it to a friend. By definition, would I recommend this? So 2 is would I recommend this to a friend? And I would.
You've got to talk about this grade
Okay,
inflation
let me just
that
start
we're
from the
giving.
top.
Would it be a
Yeah,
frenemy?
Yeah, really.
To a friend of me. Okay, let me just
I recommend this to someone I hate.
listen, you two. Let me just tell our readers 1 on our Michelin scale. 1 is a good book, wouldn't recommend it to a friend. 2 is a great book, would recommend it to a friend.
So this
I know.
doesn't mean-
Just let me finish. 3 is would read it again. That's how good it was. So it's very simplistic. It's not a 1 through 5. It's a 1 through 3 scale. The reason I'm saying it's a 2 is I don't think it's a great book, but I would recommend it to a friend because I do think some people need a throwaway book. They want to read a little romance. I think especially a lot of women that I know. And Phil, this even comes up later because of the book you recommended to people if they like this book, which is I'll just give it away, is the women. So I do think there is a demographic for this, and I don't want to shit on those people.
That's a great point, Phoebe. Here's my counterpoint, and I think this needs to be discussed, and you can keep it in the podcast. The scale should be how many books did you read last year, Phoebe?
I don't know, like 100 something.
150 or
Not
something
150.
like that. Like a crazy amount of books. We read a lot of books. What I'm saying, have you ever met somebody that just had a baby and they show you 3,000 pictures of the baby
put this on a
and you're like, I don't want to see your baby anymore. Show me the 5 best ones. Show me the top 5 of your baby. And then let's look at them and talk about them and look how cute that baby is. What recommend to a friend should mean is that you're recommending that above all the other ones that you could have recommended.
Okay, here's the thing. I hear your point. Great point. A lot of people that I'm reading and recommending to also read this much. Like if I was recommending to my aunts or some close friends that I have, you guys, they've read a lot of books. So they've read a lot of the same books I've read. And I maybe would throw this out there. If they hadn't read it yet, I would say I would.
Okay. Entertain that
I would
point.
give it up front.
Embrace your 2.
I would give it up front. Like, hey, this isn't the best book I've ever read, but it's not the worst book I've ever read.
And I would hope that I was at that interaction so I could give it a 0 right behind you and save them some time.
Okay, so you're a 0. Isaac, I don't think we need to like even say you're a 0, obviously.
I'm a 0, yeah.
This is definitely not your cup of tea.
I wish it wasn't.
This is a female lead. It's a 0 for Isaac.
Brutal.
Okay. Well, you know what? It's always good to have difference of opinions, heated discussion. I'm glad we got to hear each other's points. I definitely understand.
And I think you got to read a couple bad books and you got to slay a couple dragons to appreciate the princess. And that's really what you get with a bad plot really reveals the brightness of the plot.
I mean, I think as an adult too, like, I don't know that I would have, I think I started to realize like what I liked in a book and what I didn't. And I agree with you, Phil. It's, you have to read books that you really don't like to know what you do like. So that's a great point. And I've already kind of ruined your recommendation, Phil, and I think Isaac was going to say the exact same thing. But I would say if you liked this book, you should read I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca Makkai. I have recommended her on the podcast before because she's the author of The Great Believers, which is a fabulous book. I read I Have Some Questions for You because of that. And it left a lot to be desired. And I felt that it had the same kind of tee up without the execution that this book did. But again, it's also something I may recommend to someone else because it wasn't horrible. Maybe it's something they haven't read. It could be their cup of tea. So I think very much in the same vein. And it also is supposed to be a thriller murder mystery vibe. So I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca Makkai is the name of that if you liked Mind Games by Nora Roberts. Phil and Isaac?
Yeah, mine was The Women by Kristen Hanna, which we have already read.
Which is why I think that some people might like this book because we have a lot of people that we know that are like, have you read The Women? It's amazing.
So yes, correct.
When you say a lot.
That's true.
Like every woman I have ever talked to is like, I loved The Women.
Okay.
And
we
even
won't beat the dead horse.
And Isaac, you were going to say The Women also.
I was going to say The Women. I would say you could probably, I think the cozy, I'm sure there is a section of a coffee shop, the airport, the bookstore, the library that will be coming out with those. Just snag up one of those bad boys and
give it a read.
Power it down. Yeah.
I think Isaac's right. To give fair shrift, like, there's no judgment in liking books like these.
Yeah.
It's not my thing, but I also know that like those 10-hour like John Grisham books.
Yeah, it's the same thing as this.
So there's no judgment in liking books like these. I think that it's just anybody's guilty pleasure. Mine is like a 10-hour John Grisham that is, I probably know what's going to happen to the plot. I probably know the courtroom drama that's going to unfold. If you're not into courtroom dramas, it's not your thing. And to be honest, he writes the same book every single time, and I read it up. Yeah. So I don't think that this is like I think everyone needs to have their guilty pleasure book. But I don't think that this would be Isaac or mine's, obviously.
Yeah.
But Phoebe makes a great point that she knows people that this would be their guilty pleasure book. So
yeah, and I didn't hate it. I think that all the things that you guys have said are true, but that didn't make me dislike the book that much. Yeah. And with all of that, we will talk a little bit about what we are reading next time when we meet, which will be on October 21st. And that will be Things Fall Apart. Isaac, do you want to tell us just briefly about that?
Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe is a novel that chronicles the life of Akonu, the leader of a Igbo community, from the events leading up to his banishment from the community for accidentally killing a Klansman through the 7 years of his exile to his return, and addresses a particular problem of emerging Africa, the intrusion of the 1890s of white missionaries and colonial government into tribal Igbo society.
Yes, great. I'm excited to read this book. I've started it. It is particularly challenging with some of the names, the African names, just because they're obviously uncommon to us as American white readers. So if you have a chance to read a hard copy, I think that would probably help you. But honestly,
because they are spelled.
Yeah, it's very different spelling, so it's easy to pick up on. But the pronunciation is a bit different. So very excited to talk about this book with you guys. I think this is going to be a deeper one with a lot of different meanings to discern from it. So excited to have this little break with Mind Games by Nora Roberts, but also excited to get back to a deeper discussion with you two. And as always, This is your bi-weekly reminder to call someone that you love, tell them that you love them, tell them about a good book that you've recently read. Pass no judgment on any good books that they've recently read that you maybe don't agree with. And use your local library as much as you can. And until we meet again, stay classy, second pagers. We'll see you later.
See you guys.
Bye, guys.
Let's go beyond.